Hey, what's up guys? My name is Béla and you're watching a Fictron review of Rusty Lake's newest game, The Past Within. Rusty Lake is a Netherlands-based game studio that has created several point-and-click puzzle games over the years, all of which connect in a dark and twisted overarching story centered around the lake of the same name. I've talked about them a little bit on the podcast before and would love to do a dedicated episode on the series, but right now, I really want to talk about The Past Within. I'll do my best to keep major spoilers to a minimum in case anyone wants to check it out themselves, so without further ado,
let's get alternative.
So to begin with, The Past Within is a two-player co-op game, the first of its kind in the Rusty Lake series. One player takes on the role of a character in the past, while the other player controls a character in the future. And when I first heard this game would be two-player, I was skeptical. I did not think this would necessarily work well for a Rusty Lake game, and apparently I wasn't the only one. I encountered a few other fans asking if there would be a single-player mode. The Rusty Lake games are very atmospheric. You really want to immerse yourself in the world when you play, and I was worried speaking to another person constantly would break the immersion. But actually, I found the whole exchange surprisingly intimate and felt more invested in the story than usual. And let's talk about how they actually made this game two-player. It's ingenious, because although it is advertised as a co-op game, mechanically, the game is single-player. By this, I mean it doesn't actually connect to anyone else's game. Instead, you're given the choice to play in the past or the future, and the game instructs you to then make sure you and your co-player choose differently. If you choose the future, they must choose the past, and vice versa. So rather than any sort of connection between game sessions, both players simply need to ensure they have the same starting conditions in their own offline copy of the game. All of the two-player elements exist purely through word of mouth. Let's say, for example, player 1 has a 4x4 grid with specific patterns, and player 2 has a box with a 4x4 combination lock. Player 1 relays the symbols they see on their screen to player 2, so they can open the box. Now player 2 uncovers a clue which can help player 1 solve their next puzzle. And every single puzzle in the game is built on this foundation, mutually uncovering new clues to help further each other along. It kind of reminds me of Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, but if both players had a bomb and a manual for defusing each other's bomb. Also, the manuals are the bombs. And of course, there's no time limit, and nobody explodes. Well, almost. This is really clever game design on Rusty Lake's part, because it means they don't need to host any servers for the game. Instead, they just host a bunch of two-person voice channels in their Discord server. A two-player game doesn't necessarily need to connect with something. All that's needed is for you to connect with someone. And I think this is why the experience of playing it with someone for the first time was so intimate. Rather than breaking my immersion from the game, it felt as if my co-player was a part of the game itself, just as I'm sure I felt a part of the game to them. Because both of you necessarily have to make yourselves a part of the game for it to function. Each of you represents a missing half of a whole for the other person, mutually vital information which you have to foster a symbiotic relationship to acquire. Okay, I think I've gushed enough about this game's ingenious co-op design, so let's move on. I've already delved into the basic gameplay of solving puzzle A so your partner can solve puzzle B so you can solve puzzle C, etc. But despite both players having mechanically similar puzzles, each side, past and future, feels like a very different game. There is of course the fact that for every puzzle you are the solver of in the future, you become the solvee of in the past, and vice versa. But they're both quite visually different as well. In the past, you start off in a small room with 4 two-dimensional facades to explore, much like many other titles in the Rusty Lake series, while the future player starts off with a 3D model of a cubic device to freely rotate around. This is the first time a Rusty Lake game has ever had anything 3D in it, and I have to say, they pulled it off well. They really did translate their visual 2D style into 3D pretty seamlessly. And you know me. I love it when medium is used effectively to emphasize elements in a story, and the way this game handles it is spectacular. As you and your co-player progress through the game, you learn very early on that the room of the past player is actually contained inside of the future player's cube device. This is what I'm talking about with medium reflecting story elements. The player in the past is, in essence, confined to the future player's box, and this confinement is emphasized in the restrictive 2D exploration style, rigidly looking from wall to wall and cutting abruptly to various close-ups. In contrast, there is the future player looking inwards into the room of the past player, enjoying the three-dimensional privilege of free rotation because by comparison, they are free. This graphical difference highlights the dynamic between both characters so well, no dialogue needed. Honestly, I could say more about this contrasting style, but I would have to spoil a lot about the story, and I don't want to ruin the surprises. With the room from the past contained within the cube of the future, anything that happens with one should surely affect the other, and the game does a really good job of showing similar visual cues for both players simultaneously. For example, the future player's cube shakes from playing loud music. The past player's whole room shakes violently from the inside. And you might be wondering how two separate game iterations could time these cues so well without any connection. It's simple. Solving specific puzzles will trigger specific visuals and audio, so when the past player inputs a specific puzzle solution given to them by the future player right after they started up the music, the past player's room shakes. So yeah, these cues aren't perfectly timed, but they just add another layer of intimacy to the experience. Your room is shaking? Oh my gosh, my box is shaking! Little details such as these can really help solidify the bond between players. Oh, look at me. There I go talking about the ingenious co-op design again. Okay, Rusty Lake, you know I hate to do this, but I gotta give some criticism here. While the puzzle-solving dynamic between players is really cool, especially playing through it for the first time, it does get a little one-note after a while. This happens in particular when certain puzzles are recycled over and over again, and there are quite a few moments like this in the game. Oh hey, I found a 6-digit code for you to enter. Okay, let me just input it right now. I received a message. Look under the window. Okay, I'm looking under the window. Oh, it's another 6-digit code for you to enter of the same kind. Okay, let me put it in. It says the sink holds a secret. Gee, wonder what I'll find in the sink. Oh, look, another 6-digit code. Yeah, that was the weakest part of the game for sure. I can understand why Rusty Lake would do this. Too many different puzzles might become gratuitous or clutter up your cube a bit much. But once you've solved a puzzle for the first time, there's just no challenge in solving it again with a different solution. And I think they could have changed it up a bit. Maybe changed the mechanics of the puzzles themselves a little with each iteration. One other suggestion I want to make, and I know this is going to sound crazy given everything I've said about the game so far, I think Rusty Lake should release a single-player mode for this game. Hear me out. The thing is, you already can play through this game by yourself. You just need to find a walkthrough with all the information you normally receive from your co-player at any given moment. And I know there are going to be people replaying this game, hunting for achievements and doing exactly that. So why not have a mode where, at appropriate times, a message appears along the lines of, you receive a premonition from the past or future, followed by whatever vital information you need to know in that moment. You could design it just like the hint system in Cube Escape Cave. Now, in case I've pissed anyone off, I just want to say this game is, without a doubt, much more engaging with another player, and I highly recommend anyone playing it for the first time to experience it as it was designed. My suggestion is Rusty Lake release an update to the game in which single-player modes are unlocked after playing through both past and future with another player once. It just occurred to me that there have been a lot of fans asking for a single-player mode, and every other game up to this point in the series has been single-player, so I don't think it's too crazy an idea to at least give people the option. The last thing I want to say is that you really want to make sure you have a good partner when you play, and I don't mean both of you being good at puzzle games, though that does help. I mean you want to have chemistry with the person you play with, or it could make the experience much more stale. The first time I played was with a total stranger, and I got lucky. I had an awesome partner to go through the game with. Shout out to you, you know who you are. I'm also going to recommend you play through the past and future sides with the same person for the first time, and that you go in blind together with someone else who hasn't yet played the game. The Past Within is a phenomenal puzzle game and is easily my favorite Rusty Lake game to date in terms of gameplay. It's an exciting time for Rusty Lake. They're riding high on an absolute banger release, following a more lukewarm reception to Samsara Room a couple years back. More than anything, I'm filled with excitement for what's to come from Rusty Lake in the future. But remember, the past is never dead. Thank you all so much for watching my review. If you like what you see, please consider subscribing to our channel, Fictron, where we do a podcast exploring alternative fiction. Maybe one day we'll discuss the Rusty Lake series as a whole. So have a fantastic day, everyone, and stay alternative.